Your liquid cash is what keeps you in business, especially when things go south. This is Alex Buriak, and I'm on the drive, where I give you guys tips, strategies, and advice on how to grow your business and stay out of trouble. All right. So, as an investor, one of the things that you guys have to really understand is that your liquidity, which means basically the cash you have access to, is what's going to save you in your investment. It's going to help you keep you, productive. It's going to keep you safe. Okay, that's why people use lenders like me. Where it could be higher interest rate, higher points, and stuff like that. It's the speed and it's the ability for you to keep your cash in your pocket. Okay, or at least the majority of it. So how do you look at things when you're starting out or when you're seasoned? I'm always a big believer of, you start out with your exit, okay? You start out with, your profits and what you're trying to do, and you work backwards. Well, when you're looking at that, you're gonna have to look at the kind of cash that you have. One of the biggest questions I'll get with people that are like starting out is, okay, well, I have X amount of dollars, is that enough to start? Well, it depends on what you're doing, okay? So think about it in investment real estate. You could either be a wholesaler, you could be a flipper, or you could be someone who holds properties for rent. Eventually, you should always be all three, okay? But you got to start out somewhere, right? My advice to you is that if you're working with less than $10,000, okay, most likely you are going to either have to be a wholesaler or you're going to have to just partner up with people. With either way are acceptable, because they're both very useful in the business and in the education on how to get things done. Even my seasoned people, when they've flipped, let's say they flip 5, 10, 15 properties, and they start moving into a different price margin or asset class and stuff, same thing happens to them. They're like, okay, well, I got to partner with somebody, or I got to find different ways of getting this investment done. So if you're working with that, you're going to have to probably, 10,000 or less. Most likely you're going to have to start wholesaling, just because for a lender, one of our biggest concerns is, can you hold the note? Can you make your payments? Can you do the work and get reimbursed on your draws? And do you have any out-of-pocket expenses at closing? Because yeah, there are $0 financing options, but that's on how you bought it. Most of your deals are not going to be $0 out of pocket, okay? And you can watch one of our past videos on how $0 out-of-pocket financing works. It's how you bought it, okay? So here's a good rule of thumb, no matter what your lender is requiring. These three things, all right? So one, you should have at least 6 months of interest payments somewhere in your liquidity. You should have at least a third of the renovation budget somewhere in your liquidity, in your cash. You should have any out-of-pocket cost at closing somewhere in your liquidity, and this is why. Well, let's go over the 6 months of interest payments first. Okay, so that lets you know that at least 6 months of the project, which on most of your renovation cases should be sufficient for you to finish it and list the property if you're flipping it, and more than sufficient if you're going to fix the property and get it refinanced, okay? So you have 6 months of interest payments you have access to. So you don't have to worry about raising more money or making more money or anything like that to make your payments, okay? You just bought this investment. Worst thing you can do is let it go to foreclosure, okay? So you want at least 6 months of interest payments somewhere in your liquid reserves. How do you calculate that? Like, Alex, I don't know what 6 months looks like, okay? So you get your rate, all right? So let's say it's 9.9 or 10.9 or 11.9 or whatever it is, okay? And you get your loan amount. You're just like, well, Alex, what's my loan amount? Okay, well, what's your lender lending total loan? Okay, so if it's 70% loan to value and it's 100,000 ARV, 100,000 times 70% gets your loan amount. You multiply that by your interest rate, okay? And then you divide by 12 for 12 months. And that's your payment. Then I would suggest that you guys do find the property taxes, divide that by 12, and add your payment and your property taxes together, and that's your monthly payment. Okay, times 6 is what you would need. All right, so the second thing is a third of the renovation budget. All right, so if you have $30,000 in renovation, you should have at least $10,000 liquid to start making the project move as you close. You go for inspection, you're waiting for draw money to come back. You still have money to keep the project going as you're waiting to be reimbursed. It's a seamless process, okay, of money out, money in, okay? But you have to have enough liquidity to keep that project moving. So I say a third, no matter what your lender is requiring, because as a business person, you don't never want to be strapped for cash, okay? So you do a third to make sure that you can keep your draws moving, because the faster you can get this thing rehabbed, the faster you can get it on the market, or the faster you can get it for rent, the more money you're going to make, okay? The last thing is anything out of pocket at closing, all right? And you're like, well, Alex, I don't know that. Well, one, make sure you get with a lender and get a term sheet, and it'll tell you how much out of pocket you're going to come out with. Whether you're under contract or not, the term sheet's really easy to generate on projections and comparables and things like that. So there's 2 different ways you can look at it. If you have a loan to value lender, it's really, really simple, okay? You take the loan to value that they're lending, so let's say up to 70%, all right? And let's do the $100,000 estimate just because it's easy math. $100,000 ARV times 70% is $70,000 total loan. $30,000 in repairs is 70 minus 30. That means they're closing with 40. Okay, so if you bought it for 50, that means you're out of pocket 10 plus closing costs. So you know you're north of 10. If you bought it for 30 and they're closing with 40, they're going to roll in $10,000 worth of closing costs. That's usually a $0 out of pocket deal. So you get a good idea if you don't want to go to your lender and get a term sheet. I don't know why you wouldn't, but if you don't, you get that dollar, because that's gone day one. Cashier's check or money order title, day one, that's gone. Okay, you don't get that returned back until you sell or refinance or whatever you're doing. So that if you have loan to cost, you'll notice that they're like, oh, we do up to 75% loan to value. Very rarely do you even approach 75% loan to value, because this is how it works. If you're up to 90% loan to cost and 75% loan to value, that means they're only going to fund 90% of the purchase price, or as is value, whatever's less. So if you bought it for 100, they're only going to fund 90. Okay, if it's worth 90 and you bought it for 100, they're only going to do 90% of the 90. Okay, so you can calculate your rough estimate out of pocket cost right there. On how much money you would need at closing, really, really quickly. Okay, so let's talk about that's one of what monies you would need. Let's talk about the type of money that you guys have. All right, of course there's checking and savings. That's the easiest. You can go right now and go buy a sandwich with a card, and that's how much you got. Okay, the second things are lines of credit. All right, you can use usable lines of credit if it's going to be something that you can use it to purchase something for the investment. Like a $10,000 line of credit at Macy's is not going to help you. Okay, so if you have revolving lines or HELOCs and things like that, really, really simple. Really, really simple to calculate. You can go and buy something with it today, kind of thing. One thing you have to watch is that you can't have the majority of your liquidity as lines of credit, and this is why. Because you are paying interest on a project with your loan, and now you're paying interest on the project with the investment done. It puts you at higher risk, okay? And just as a business person, you got to just calculate your cost of capital, because you have to pay higher interest on that money, so your net return is going to be lower. Another thing you have is securitized cash. Like if you have a self-directed IRA, a self-directed 401k, those two are a little bit separate. You have to get with your custodian on how to manage that capital for this investment, because that money has to be returned back, and there's just a way to do it. You can use them, just make sure you're in compliance with your custodian of your self-directed IRA or 401k on how to use that money within this investment and how to pay it back appropriately so you don't get any kind of tax disadvantages or anything like that. The other type of securitized investment is like, you have a stock option, a Vanguard account, a regular 401k, regular IRA, things like that. What is normal, and again, you have to go with your custodian. A custodian is the person that manages the account. What I've seen in the past that's common is that you can take out, it'd be like 50% or $50,000, whatever's less, of like a 401k. But you gotta pay that stuff back. It's taxable income. All these kind of things like that. So you actually have to liquidate those monies, okay, and to use it. So the reason why I suggest you do is because they fluctuate within capital markets and stock markets and securitized markets. So if anybody has a 401k, have you ever seen a huge drop in your value? There you go. So that's why you have to consider liquidating part of that account for this investment and having your custodian and tax strategists and accountants and stuff like that really make sure you're in line with all the benefits and risks of doing that. It could be very profitable. Just make sure you're protected. One of the last ones is going to be crypto. As time passes, you'll probably see more and more use cases for crypto. The only thing I've seen available today is that you liquidate it. Okay, it's just like any other currency, or any kind of investment. There's going to be, like, if you guys use any of these coin wallets and stuff like that, you're going to have a realized gain. Okay, so just make sure you again get with your accountants and stuff like that. But if you're going to pull money out, you're going to have to pull it out. The reason why, if anybody's watching the crypto market, that thing is up and down. Okay, and who knows what it's going to do. And so it's going to be something that you got to watch, because you're like, oh, I got $50,000 in it. Well, if it takes a drop, it can take a drop quickly, and all of a sudden you have $30,000 in it. So that's why you have to be able to realize those gains and use it for this investment. So if you're using those types of strategies for your liquidity, just make sure you're in compliance. Make sure you get your accountant involved. Make sure, I'm not saying not to do it, and I'm not trying to freak you out about doing it. I'm trying to tell you that, hey, you have other things that you have to consider when you use that type of liquidity, to make sure that the investment that you're purchasing, its return outweighs the cost. Okay, because there's other costs now when you use that type of liquidity for your investment. So I hope that helped with an understanding of what type of liquidity that you can use, how much you think you should have. It's just a good practice in business to make sure you keep your cash in your pocket and you have enough cash to run this operation. Because if you run into lenders that don't require you to have liquidity, you got to ask yourself why. Okay, if you couldn't pay for this, you can't start the project, you can't get anything done. How is that ethical for someone to say, here you go, now take it, now give it back to me, you can't pay for it? That don't make sense to me. All right, maybe it's just me, but that's why I'm trying to let you guys know about having your cash on you. And the whole point of using lending is to try to keep your cash on you. Okay, or you would just buy things cash, and some people do. I think it's a mistake, because you can't scale real estate investment in cash. You just, unless you have an exorbitant amount of liquid capital, there's no way to do it. You can buy, like, well, Alex, I don't have debt on it. Yeah, you got one property, and you got to wait for that thing to refinance, or you're not going to refinance because you don't have debt, and then you got to figure out another way to get another 100,000, and the limits of what you can do. I mean, if you only have 100 grand, you're like, I got 100 grand. I'm like, find me a house today in this market that's worth anything that's $100,000. Okay, it's not going to happen. So people utilize and leverage their cash to buy bigger assets. It's important that you guys structure your operations on how to pay down that debt, and that asset's making you a greater return on your cost of capital. All right, so that's why I wanted to go over liquidity with you guys, because it's really a big question that we always get with lenders. You know, and then it kind of just moves into common sense. You know, I'll get things like, hey Alex, I want to buy this $30 million building. I got 100 grand. You can't do it. All right. You don't have enough. You don't have enough to float this. You know, so get with your lender if you still have you know, questions about if you can buy this investment. And it doesn't mean that you can't. You just may need other partners and other help and other strategies. So get with your lender that you're using to go over the liquidity that's needed to close on the loan, because they're interested in your investment. They're interested in lending, but they just want to make sure that every lender's main goal, am I going to get the money back? Okay. I hope that helped. If you guys need anything, like, share, comment, ask me about, you know, hey, I need you to do this type of video, and I'll get it done for you. Have a good day.